The Swans, plenty of coverage in New South Wales and Sydney this morning, and rightly so. They were fantastic yesterday. Their midfield absolutely dominated. Tactically, they unravelled the strengths of the West Coast, and they got their just desserts.
Roosy, they look to me like they had the intensity of 05-06, but with more strike power.
I think so. I think there's no doubt that Kieran Jack at his best adds that really outside run, even though a lot of his footy yesterday was contested. He's got a great mix. Jed is the one that's really transformed them into a sort of an outside running team, and Shaw as well over the last 3 or 4 years, although Shaw got tagged. But I think you're absolutely right. I just think that the desperation that they showed. And now the Eagles were missing some players, but let's not take anything away. That's a 50. That's a thumping by the Swans, and they did it convincingly after being 20 points down in the first sort of 10 minutes. So then the rest of the game was almost completely one-sided.
You know what? They've got this great capacity to win on the road.
Yep.
I mean, 2011, 2012, 19 games, and they've won 11 of them. I mean, that's a good return, isn't it?
Yeah, look, I think for the Swans, traditionally, because they're a relocated team originally, and we're going back years and years and years, but particularly in Melbourne, they get a lot of support in Melbourne. Obviously, they've been that great rivalry with West Coast, and the ground has never held that many fears. When you're an interstate club, and we'll talk to Brenton about it later on, you don't necessarily fear travelling that much, to be honest. You just fear the opposition you're playing. I think that was the greatest fear for the Swans, not the ground, but the Eagles have been in really good form.
It was their midfield though, Mike. Hanbury had 42, O'Keefe 39, and just did a fantastic job right on the inside. Kieran Jack, as you mentioned, and Gerard McVeigh is playing some great footy. And it did just, I think, emphasise the loss that Shuey was last week. And they just couldn't afford to lose 3 or 4 more players, which they did on top, and they've just reached the tipping point.
There is exactly. That's what it is. It's a tipping point, and I think there were 8 of West Coast's starting 22 who didn't play, and I think you just get to a point at sometimes when you just lose your firepower because of what's happened with their forward line, and we see the missing Eagles here. Now Mark Lacroix won't be back. And Josh
Sheahan and
Kennedy,
Beau Waters were the ones they really missed. Though. The drive of Beau Waters, and they locked down the Swans on their half-back line. It was brilliant stuff. And Shuey through the middle of the ground just exposed a lack of depth there.
Oh, look, I think the great thing, you mentioned the coaching staff briefly before, I thought they did a really good job, the Swans coaching staff, in particular in the ruck. I thought Stephen Torbett, one of the great ruckmen of all time, but what they did to Natanui Cox was fantastic. Within the rules of the game, we saw here continually they took Natanui's run legitimately out of the contest.
Is it legitimate, Roosy?
Well, I think it is, because he's still allowed to get the ball.
And it's still in the circle,
It's still in the circle.
Yeah, I'm not sure allowed to take their run,
you're allowed to do anything in the circle.
Providing you don't go across in front of him and block him. Natanui had access to the ball, but see how Natanui actually makes the contest first and then pulls away from it. So I thought the ruckman of Mumford and Pike did a number on Cox and Natanui, and we haven't seen that at all this year, and I'm sure a lot of the other ruck coaches will have a look at that. And the other guy I'd give a big tick to is Mike Pike. I mean, we have probably given him a couple of little ticks.
He's your Natanui.
I think when we talk about what he's doing now, he's in the team in a top side doing these sort of things.
That's the first time Darren Glass has been outmarked since the under-18 competition.
That's exactly right. And he's turned him round now as well.
The kick was
You can see the athleticism. So he's actually in the team as legitimate forward ruckman, which is a great effort.
Roosy, we interviewed him after the game. Is he Canadian or Irish, or a combination of both? He's got an unusual accent.
Well, he was Canadian when he sent that try to me, when he ran away from that rocker something or other from New Zealand.
From the All Blacks.
Yeah. So, look, it is a really good story. Well,
I thought Nick Nat was actually quite disappointing on the weekend. There was a
I
real
could tell in your call. I mean, you were like his personal coach.
Well, I thought
what was he doing wrong?
He just wasn't working hard enough. I mean, they needed Cox to play more in the forward line, and by virtue of that, Natanui to fire in the middle. Didn't do the work around the ground. I know he hasn't got a massive tank yet, but it wasn't his finest
I'll tell you
hour.
what he did do. He went higher than anyone I've ever seen at a boundary throw-in at one point. It was just amazing.
Tap out of the year, Mike.
Look at that.
You know what happened, though? The ball went down the other end of the ground. The Swans kicked the goal.
Yeah.
And I just think he may be... And look, he's still young and he's still learning. I think he was a little bit spooked by the tactics of the Swans ruckman. And he did look a little bit tired as well, Gerard. I think he... Yeah, and they're all going to go through that at different stages, young players. I thought he was a bit tired and just got a bit spooked by those tactics.
Just quickly, Roos, the hometown factor has been talked about a lot. Sometimes it works when there's no noise. Now, there were 2 things that the Eagles were involved in. They were as deliberate as any incidents that I've seen. And because there was no outcry from the crowd, well, nothing happened. Now, it does work. It is a factor, isn't it?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt with that one in particular, because if you look at that...
That's just deliberate as anything you can do.
Well, I'm not sure. He's handballing at the boundary umpire.
He didn't even bounce it over.
And this is just after, I think, wasn't it?
Well, only a couple of minutes ago. I think the umpires lacked a little bit of courage on those two occasions. Mike, we've got to move it on. Brenton Sanderson not far away, but the Cats' poor starts have become a major Achilles heel for them.